Sometimes you do certain things or you allow certain things to happen to you, and you look back in hindsight at the things that you did or allowed to happen to you, and you really question your own sanity. But sometimes those insane moments, experiences, are what define you today, or are what opened up your eyes to certain things that you needed your eyes to be opened up to, but without those experiences, you wouldn't have known that. And sometimes these events aren't things that you necessarily initiate, but sometimes they're external and they just happen to you. And they seem really bad or really catastrophic at the time, but later on you're thinking, thank goodness that happened, or for better or for worse, I needed that experience. I remember many years ago, this was between the years 2000 and 2010, I won't tell you the exact year, but it was in that frame. I was 18 years old. I was in Brazil, living in Brazil, teaching English in Brazil. And there were a lot of other American teachers teaching at the same school I was, because it was just an arrangement the school had where they would take foreigners who were native speakers to teach English. And it was the most popular school in town because all the Brazilians in that town wanted to have English classes with native speakers, and there was only one school that had only native speakers. And the couple of years preceding that moment of me teaching English at that school, my life felt, I know I was quite young still and inexperienced being 18, but my life did feel a bit like being in a bit of a rut, because I was in a household, let's just say it wasn't the healthiest of households, especially given the relationship between the parents and other things. And it's almost like you're looking for some kind of inspiration, you're looking for some kind of catalyst to help you get out of that rut, get out of that dump into something new. And then there was this teacher at the school. So I'm actually editing part of the original video because I mentioned the friend's name, which I probably shouldn't do to allow for discretion. He was 10 years older than me at the time, maybe 9 years. I think he was 27 and I was 17 or 18. I can't remember. Maybe I was 19. Anyway, something in that range. And he was very much this bigger than life character. Him and I, we quickly became best friends, and we were kind of, enjoying ourselves, going out, just living life a bit more than we probably should have, quite intensely during that period that him and I were there. And him being this bigger than life character, and he had his own kind of issues from his childhood that I never gave too much thought of at the time, but he grew up in a single parent household with his mom, his dad. He never knew his dad. He was an only child. And it's almost like he made up for that kind of emptiness by being this person with a lot of gravitas, where people would just gravitate towards him. He'd make people feel great. But at the same time, he would invite very dramatic situations and sometimes very catastrophic situations. And if you were with him, you would be party to that. So at that time, I was really trying to figure out who I was going to be, going into my late teens, into my early adult years, and what my next move was going to be. And him and I, we started to really kind of, I'm not sure if take on each other's traits, but when you just really get on with somebody and, their traits, which you don't have, start rubbing off on you, and your traits, which you don't have, start rubbing off on them. And I just started to just allow myself to go on board with his wild adventures, let's say. And I remember he told me at the time that he was writing a book. And he was going to publish a book, and that his book was going to be a bestseller one day. And I didn't give it much thought at the time, but in hindsight, all these adventures that he was living, in a way, were serving a purpose for him. And I won't go through much of the detail of it, but let's just say it was giving him content for his book. So he was putting himself out there. He was doing things that you might think, no right person in their mind would ever do or allow themselves to put themselves in certain situations. But at the same time, in hindsight, I realized all those things that were happening to him were giving him the material that he needed to actually produce something that was his life goal at the time. So, and he always told me, because we were, we shared a lot of experiences, and there's certain things that we did I never would have done with anyone else who was just normal, but I don't regret any of it, because he infused a sense of life in me when I was 18 that had you feel kind of dead. You feel kind of without momentum. You don't have this momentous towards any direction, which you're really feeling. And he infused that in me. It did come at a cost, or at least momentary costs. Nothing that I couldn't bounce out of. But I couldn't imagine anyone else who was able to uplift me out of a state of not really knowing what direction I wanted to go into and certain hurdles I was facing. I couldn't think of anyone else with any other kind of personality setup that would have been capable of doing that in the way that he did. And I know it's been, I won't say how many years, but it's been decades, hasn't it? Between 2000 and 2010, since we had that 6-month, 12-month coexisting just friendship. But until this day, I can't really forget the things that I felt and learned by associating with this person, and the experiences we had that really kind of opened up so many new ways of thinking for myself, new landscapes and all that, right? And he always told me, Joseph, I'm going to publish my book one day, and there's going to be a chapter in it dedicated to you, but you'll have to read it one day to find out what it's about. I was like, all right, didn't take it seriously. Anyway, fast forward a few years from the time I found out that he was killed by police officers. Again, I'm making further edits to the original video because I gave away certain details, very specific details of the incident in the original recording, which I probably shouldn't, so I've deleted that. Lifestyle and let's just say he could be quite confrontational, and he's the kind of person that would never back down from danger if it presented itself to him in front of him. And he was also the kind of person that was quite outspoken and quite fearless, but to the point where obviously it was to his detriment. So he had an altercation. Again, I'm just cutting out a small segment of the original video because I put too much personal detail. Shortly after he started working, he opened up a business there. And basically, the altercation led to an undercover police officer drawing a gun on him, and he didn't back down. He still confronted the police officer with a gun, and then obviously, things happen. There was one thing from his perspective that I wish he would have known, was that, Brazil, South America, in the early-ish 2000s, until this day, it's not like North America, it's not like Western Europe. It is another ball game, and the rules there are different. If you're not careful, shit will happen. I mean, shit can happen anywhere in the world, but in those places it can happen a lot more severely. So when I did eventually find out about what happened to him, because I only found out about it a couple of years after he was killed because we were no longer in touch as such. It's one of those things where it was really hard to accept that a person that kind of gave you new life, in a sense, that you still have until this day, because part of him I kind of feel lives in me until this day. And knowing that he wasn't around, some days I wake up and it's almost like it was yesterday, the experiences we had. It was yesterday that I was putting myself in very dangerous situations at times because of him. But he did get a good chapter out of his book because of it, because I've since read his book. And there was a chapter, it was a very, the title of the chapter was quite catching, and I immediately knew that was about our experience together. And it's one of those things where, it just kind of brought back all the memories, brought back everything. And I think I ended up reading the book. It was almost 10 years after I'd last seen him, because one of his friends actually finished the book and published it, because he was killed before the book was finished. So one of his friends up in the U.S., somewhere in northeastern part of the U.S., had a publishing company, and he finished it off, and I found out about it. So the reason I'm going through that story is because, this guy, he brought on a lot of difficult situations for himself, but I actually think that given who he was as a person, he had no other way of living his life, and he was bringing up, he was buzzing every single day. Every time I saw him, every time anyone saw him, he was the kind of person that would give you a big bear hug, tell you a joke. He would know just what to say to make you laugh. He would know just what to say to uplift you if you were down. And he never expected anything in return. You know, what he did get in return was people's loyalty and people's willingness to tag along with him and just go out and do things. And it might sound that I'm going slightly off track around what the title of this video is, but a lot of the things that happened to this guy while he was still alive, they were, in a way, contributing towards his goal. And his bigger-than-life character ultimately led to his early demise, but that's just who he was. And it's almost like he wouldn't want to live life any other way. He was adventurous to the extreme. He had a daredevil-type personality, which showed itself in the way he carried himself day to day. And a lot of the experiences that I had with him were very bad in a sense that, you know, things could have turned a lot worse than they actually did, being in South America at the time, which today, to be honest, it isn't much different in most parts there. But I learned so much from it, and I got so much new life from having had that experience. And so, sorry, there's probably a bit of noise and wind, and because I'm outside, you can probably hear the birds too. But what does that have to do with the title of this video? You know, everything happens for a reason. When you have a difficult experience, and a lot of times people's most difficult experiences in life are actually dealing with difficult people and people who have the ability to almost destroy you. Our ability to have kind of latitude in thinking, we often need to be very much tested, go through very trying experiences to expand our latitude and our ability to think and gain new perspectives and see new things. And I can think back in many examples in my life where, let's say I'm at point A, I wanted to achieve goal C, but from being at point A, I could not see the path to goal C. But then something happened, let's say incident B, and maybe incident B put me in a difficult situation for a few weeks or months. But after I eventually got out of that experience, the fact that I had to think my way out of that experience, process it, it gave me new insights and perspectives and landscapes, which eventually showed me the path to goal C. And sometimes it can be illnesses. Sometimes it can be serious illnesses, not so serious illnesses. Sometimes it can be toxic people who use or abuse you. Sometimes it can be the death of a loved one that you were unexpecting. And I know there's going to be people triggered by the whole idea. It's like, well, of course, certain things happened to me. They didn't need to happen. I wish they didn't happen. I can't see any benefit from it. But if you can react to things in the right way, because the worst thing you can do if something bad happens is start getting too drunk, go back to your vices, drugs, whatever it is you resort to, and kind of use that heavily. Yeah, if you're going to bounce out of a difficult situation in an even worse way, you know, the universe, karma, God, whatever you want to call it, you know, I'm not here to preach about the supernatural or the higher power or the universe or whatever, but I do believe there's something there that orchestrates things to us, which is tied into our ways of thinking, ways of feeling, our belief systems, and the way we carry ourselves. Like, there is this causality. And if you get angry or upset or fearful because something bad happened, then and you react to that in the most negative way possible, then it might take a lot longer or for you to actually bounce out of that in a good way, or maybe you're actually going to invite more bad things into your life. But if you allow yourself to accept, process what's happened, and try to think, what does this mean for me? How do I move forward? And how can I make the best out of this going forwards? Then I believe components fall into place to help you get to where you want to get to. And then it can take time, but at some point you realize, I'm a much better person because of this. And even though you don't always know why everything happens, and you can't explain everything, and you can't control everything, a lot of things that would have happened anyway, with or without your influence, sometimes those things do help guide you in a direction that's more suited to you. You know, it's the way things get dovetailed naturally in the natural kind of orchestration of events. You can't try to work out everything, but you kind of think, okay, what does this mean for me? You know, what does this event mean for me? What does that experience mean for me? And, you know, I know a lot of people who, whether they create content or they're doing another kind of job, you actually need to experience quite heavy, emotionally toiling situations at times to get inspiration. So inspiration, an artistic way of thinking and viewing, comes off the back of turmoil, of a bit of inner chaos, of a bit of sometimes even self-doubt that eventually manifests itself in time once it's been processed into new creation. But if you're the kind of person where you're always looking at things with a cup half empty mentality, then you'll never be able to transform those roller coaster type situations into grand outputs, or transforming them into something bigger. So the point I'm making is life really is about how you react to it and not something more objective. It's something that you can control how you react to it. And what was I saying? Oh yeah, life is about how you react to it. And it's just about finding this, it's about getting your head into a place where you can consistently separate things that are happening to you and things that you are allowing to happen. Because when you bounce out of situations, that's kind of in your control, but things that happen are not always in your control. And then you can always create new landscapes. You can always create new perspectives. You can always approach new things with a new zest and a new way of thinking. And sometimes if you feel a bit dead inside, you need something drastic to happen to waken you up. But then you have to kind of find a way to keep yourself awake. Because sometimes we think we want to just have a static, neutral existence where nothing new is happening because we don't want any trouble. But actually, maybe that's not what we really want. Maybe we actually do want to bring things into our lives that infuse us with actual, real life. Thanks for watching. Also, don't forget to connect on Instagram. I've attached a link in the comments and also in my bio. And if you want any consultations, coaching, or anything you think I might be able to help you with, then the link to my email address is in my bio.